Mr. Booker, and I recognize the gentlelady for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panelists for bringing your expertise to bear on this very important topic. I share some of the sentiments that you've heard from my colleagues on this side of the aisle, and I'll share with you where I'm having a little bit of difficulty. It has to do with the definition of terrorism, and I understand the specific terrorism that we're talking about with regards to radical Islam and the purview of this committee, which is Homeland Security overall. My concern is that we don't minimize the terrorism that many communities face due to gangs in this nation. And in some of the response that I've heard, it kind of made it seem as though garden variety gang activity does not translate into terrorism. And I'd like us to not lose sight of that. While I understand the purview of this hearing, for us to minimize what has happened. I mean, why have our on drugs, if which is the purview of Homeland Security, if we don't see these criminal enterprises as undermining our nation? So I'd like to assert that, because I think that there is some convergence in a prison culture that breeds the type of challenges that we see in our civil society, whether it is the radicalization of an individual through a religious means or through a violent, organized family crime means. I'd like us not to lose sight of that, because I think it's going to be important that we address it comprehensively in our pursuit of thwarting any types of radicalization that comes from those individuals who are practicing Islam, as you've stated. My question to you would be, what percentage of individuals have you been able to identify at this stage? I don't know whether there's been any national movement to identify individuals who are likely, given the profile of activities, that would be inclined to get involved in some sort of international plot. Mr. Dunleavy?
I don't think you can. I don't think you can put a number on it. I would say it's a very select, small group. Again, we mentioned the Senate report where it said that there was as many as 36 ex-inmates in Yemen in training. We look how many ex-inmates are there in society. There's probably hundreds of thousands. So there's 36. We're looking at a filtering process that takes down. But the committed jihadist only needs one to strap on and to blow up and to create the most damage. So numbers, it's kind of a misnomer in trying to understand the situation.
Let me say then that if it only takes one, would we find some parallels then to massive gang recruitments and the taking of life over time in various communities? The numbers of individuals, families, communities that have been disrupted. How do we balance out, I guess, our mentality around the difference between someone who can do one single solitary act and wipe out 3,000 people, say in New York, or that ongoing killing that is taking place by individuals who have been formerly incarcerated that continue to recruit in communities around the nation?
There's no question that gangs pose a serious danger to communities. However, there is a big distinction. I come from Los Angeles. It was known as the gang capital of the United States, where we had 60 to 70% of the homicides were gang-related. There's no doubt that occurs. The distinction and the difference is when you hear people refer to gangs as urban terrorists, it's not terrorists in the sense that we know terrorists, in that their intent is not to target innocent civilians or wage war on our country. Innocent civilians occasionally get hit by gunfire, but that's not the target.
Occasionally?
But that's not the target. That's not their intent. It's usually about territorial imperative. It's about controlling narcotics. It's about maintaining their gang status in their communities and neighborhoods.
I would beg to differ, and let me just close, because if we see this process as a isolated community issue, then we lose the point that these are Americans, right? This is an American threat, and I think that we've got to reorient ourselves if we're going to, in fact, get a handle on this type of activity in our nation. The types of dollars that we're spending fighting the war on crime, if we continue to see this as an isolated individual who ends up with collateral damage in a community, then we never really get to dealing with it adequately. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask, Mr. Rigel, I believe is his name, or Rigel, asked our panelists whether the prison yard of the Supermax prison in Colorado is monitored. And I'd like to ask, Mr. Chairman, if you would join us in a letter to really get to the bottom of whether, in fact, the response we received with that is accurate as it should have been.
Show me the letter, and we'll certainly consider signing it. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm the gentleman.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Has expired, and I was sure that members on this side of the aisle are as concerned about as anyone about gangs. Certainly Mr. Lundgren, who spent a career investigating and prosecuting gangs.